everybody. Welcome along to the Infinite Minute. And we're at a different minute. Normally we're at an earlier minute, but we're at a later minute because we had to get some work done.
It's all infinite.
It's all just one big minute. So let's talk for a few minutes about this. All right. So yesterday we talked about, we introduced the concept of the ego and the different elements of the ego, and we quickly ran through those. So now we're going to do a little deep dive into those elements. So which one are we going to talk about, Mandy? Come on, Mandy.
Well, we'll just sort of refresh, I guess, where we left off, I guess, yesterday was around just saying that the ego is always looking for in the external to fill that void that it's feeling. So it's always looking for love in the form of, we sort of listed out 5 different kind of feelings, I guess, that it searches for love in. And so that is acknowledgement, appreciation, acceptance, recognition, and security. So they're, when you kind of, if you were to bring up a scenario in your life, and you could probably see where it falls into one of those 5 categories that the ego is kind of looking to satisfy that void that it is feeling. So I don't know, maybe
what we're saying about here is, or the conclusion that we're going to end up coming to is that the infinite self is love. That's who you truly are at your deepest essence. You are just love. Yes. And what happens is we come here in the human form, and part of our journey here, and we're all doing this, is to actually start misconstruing that a little bit and going, okay, I've got to find love in my reality. So in my world, I have to go and find love. And so you're seeking for it. What happens is that you can sort of categorize how the ego is actually looking for it in, it'll show up in different relationships or in money and all those different parts of life, but it's looking for one of the 5 things in those things. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, because it thinks that is love. It's, it's that finite sense of love. It's not what the infinite would determine itself as. Like, the infinite is just love. It doesn't need to seek anything externally, whereas the ego is looking for what it thinks is love, but it's not the true sense of that word love. So
and I guess we're talking about romantic love. We're talking about wanting love from your parents, love from friends, love from a partner, and love from children. And I guess children and pets are an interesting one here, because I feel, and I'm sure you'll agree, man, that that's the closest we ever get as human, in the human form, to unconditional love. And that's really what we're talking about in terms of the infinite sense of love is unconditional. You don't have to behave a certain way. You don't have to show up a certain way. You don't have to be anything. You don't have to do anything. You just are love already. And it's the same sort of thing that you find in a pet or your children. You don't always feel like you love them, I know. Like, it's quite stressful at times. But underneath it, there's always that sense of just unconditional love. Like, you will never stop loving your children. No matter what happens, what they do, what they go and do, what they don't do, who they marry, what job they get, all that sort of stuff. That's definitely in the storyline that can happen for sure. But there's always that sense of, wow, I just love this child unconditionally. And we do find it in pets as well. It's that sense of innocence in a pet that not everyone loves pets, but really endears us to animals and to pets and nature and those sorts of things.
Nature, I was going to say, it might not necessarily be an animal of sorts, but nature in general, perhaps, But I was going to say, even if you don't have children, it's even just that sense of looking at a newborn baby. Like, I think that's a universal feeling. It sort of transcends language and culture and everything else. Everyone feels that universal feeling when you look at a newborn baby or, a cute little baby animal. Like, it doesn't matter what variety it is. There's just something about that innocence and that, we kind of connect with that and know that's actually, it's like a sense of we actually know that's our true self. That's truly what's actually going on, is there's that recognition of what's actually the true self going on there. And we feel
so using that as a construct, then you'll be able to see as we go along and talk about this stuff, the comparison of that sort of love and what that feels like to what you might be doing in your life, and what we're all doing is searching for love in other ways. So you will definitely see the difference here, and that's really what we're trying to get to.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess I could pick one of them and just say, I don't know, maybe acknowledgement. Just thinking of like lots of examples where you might do something out of the genuineness of your heart. So it's not to say that everything is driven by this agenda behind it, but it's, so you might feel, really called to help somebody. So maybe someone's going through a bit of a hard time and you feel like you want to reach out and give them a bit of a hand. And so, I don't know, maybe you go around and you clean their house for them. And maybe they're in such a state that they don't really, it sort of seems that they don't really appreciate what you've just done for them. Maybe they just can't kind of, they're not in that space. And so you kind of walk away and you kind of feel good because you just helped them out. But there's also this part of you that's just like, oh God, it would have been nice if she just said thank you, or kind of, like, I just didn't really feel like that was worth my time. Like I thought I would feel better after that, or sort of just noticing those type of thoughts that come up. It's just like, well, there was a part of you that was actually had an agenda behind what you were doing to feel this sense of love that would come in the form of acknowledgement in particular instance. So,
yeah, definitely. And I guess you'll hear us talk about the word agenda quite a bit, and that's really what the ego thrives on.
Yes.
So we feel like we're going to a situation like Mandy just described with the goodness of our heart, and it can start like that, definitely.
But
at times it's quick for the ego to take hold of that situation and go, oh wow, I didn't really get any acknowledgement from that, like just some appreciation would have been great, when you start to have those sorts of thoughts, you can tell your ego's kicked in. So it's no longer out of the goodness of your heart, and that's when we have an agenda. So the ego always has one of these 5 agendas, and
or multiple ones sometimes going at the same time.
Hey,
I said, or multiple going at the same time sometimes as well.
Or multiple, yeah, definitely can all show up at the same time, exactly. And while you're talking about that, it reminded me of something I've talked about before and heard about before is charity. A lot of people give to charities. And it starts with the goodness of your heart, definitely. You might be giving to World Vision for a child in Africa, or all these different scenarios, doing Clean Up Australia Day, or clean up where they have them all around the world now, clean up the beaches, like all these different volunteer type things, or a charity type situation where you go in, yes, with the goodness of your heart, but there's a part of you that does it because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel needed or wanted or valuable. And there's nothing wrong with that. So any of this stuff that we're talking about, there's nothing wrong with that. This is a very natural thing to feel, because the ego is a very natural thing that we all have. We're born here with ego. And it's not about trying to get rid of that and go, oh, that was really wrong, I shouldn't have done that. Like I should really be giving to World Vision without any thought about myself and how good I feel. But it's not about getting rid of it. It's about just acknowledging it, that it's there. It's actually about just witnessing it and seeing it and going, oh, wow, that's really funny. Like I gave my $40 to my World Vision child, but I actually did it because it felt pretty good to me. Like, I don't know that I was actually that focused on the child at the time when I paid that $40. Like I just felt pretty good.
Well, you might get some kind of recognition, because then you can kind of mention to people, oh yeah, I sponsor a child in Africa, or that you just sort of notice sometimes where you might bring that up in a conversation, or so it's just, that's where there's it sneaks in, at times where you just sort of, it seems like an offhanded comment, but if you really were to kind of stand back and observe it for what it actually is, you're sort of thinking, oh, okay, there is some agenda behind that too. And a bit like what Nat said, it's not about trying to get rid of the ego, because you won't actually be able to get rid of the ego. That's the thing. It's actually, the end of the day, the ego is actually you. It's created by the infinite you. It's part of the infiniteness that came out of that. It's just when we come into this human form and we have this idea that we're separate, that's when the ego gets formed. It's this idea that I'm separate, Nat's separate, we aren't all part of the one energy anymore. And so this ego comes into kind of, I guess it would say it's going to help us on our journey, but if it kind of, and it ultimately can help us at times as well, but a lot of the time it feels like it's fighting for its own survival at the end of the day. So, because it doesn't actually exist. So it's kind of fighting for its existence and looking for it in the external constantly. So you need to have a lot of that awareness and observation of what's kind of going on for yourself to kind of really be able to pull yourself back from the ego's agenda that kind of seem very automatic when you're not aware of them. It just instant split second. You don't even think about what you're saying that's coming out of your mouth or even analyze what's going on. It's just that split second neural pathway in your brain that's been formed. So
yeah, it's interesting in the ego. Like we'll definitely dive in more and just do some stuff about the ego, like why it exists, where it comes from, the science behind the ego, why you'll never get rid of it, but how it's helping you. I guess that's the big thing. Because once you become aware of the ego, then you want to get rid of it because you think it's wrong, and you start judging it, and that makes it worse because it just keeps it coming back. That's what I was looking for. So in talking about these 5 pillars of the ego, if you like, I guess we're getting a sense of how the ego works. And you'll often hear the term the ego games, and that's exactly what it becomes. Like we're talking about the infinite game here. So you're playing the infinite game or you're playing the ego game, and you get to choose which one you want to play. But the ego game is always going to be limited. So you're never going to feel that sense of complete fulfillment or unconditional love for things or joy, like we were talking about in our previous session, where you have that sense of joy. You are not going to feel that if you choose to play the ego game. And it is a choice. Oftentimes it's an unconscious choice until you come into the realm like this, or hearing somebody else speak about consciousness, where it becomes quite a conscious thing. And then you go, now I can see my ego games. I can see what I'm doing. Here I am trying to manipulate this situation or that situation, this relationship, this job, this bit of money. And you then have that moment of choice of going, okay, yeah, I see that game that I'm playing. I can choose not to play that now, and I want to play the infinite game instead.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is just that, a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. So the infinite, oneness behind everything gets manifested into this human form. The idea behind it all is to come here and completely forget who you are. And so you've come into this world with all these limitations, and then the journey is back to yourself, to remembering who you truly are. So that's the journey, and that's where that ego part comes into it. Is that journey of discovering that the ego is actually just part of the one as well, and it's that what's the word, that merging of the two together into the one energy, because that's all it is at the end of the day. So it's but it definitely, I was just going to say too, Nat, was that this whole journey is you definitely need, well, you can do it on your own. It's a lot easier, a lot quicker if you have support, which is part of the reason why we've kind of kicked off this project too, because we know how much help it's been having different mentors along the journey for us. It's really hard to see it for yourself. You can do it for sure. Like, I've definitely done a lot on my own too, but it's been way easier with people helping you on the journey to point out things that you can't quite see for yourself because you're just blind to them. So
I think that's the hardest thing, isn't it, about this journey, is that you're in your story. So you're in your relationship, you're in your job, you're in your money situation, you're in your
story.
It's so hard to step outside of it and go, oh, actually that's not working that well. Actually that could be a lot better than what it is right now. Or I could be a lot more fulfilled or more joyful about that situation right now if I just made some decisions and some changes to play more expansive than limited.
Yes. Or you might have a sense of the things that need to change, but you might not know how to go about changing them too. That's the other thing as well, that it feels really hard sometimes to make those changes when you maybe don't have the resources or the tools or the awareness to do so. Or
Definitely. Yes. Cool. Well, we've already hit 14 minutes. Do you want to move on to another one, or you want to do it tomorrow? We've always got another minute.
Maybe we can jump into a few more of them tomorrow, because some of them probably show up a little bit differently. Things like security and things like that kind of show up in a lot of different ways. So that might be one to dive into in another thing, I think, to do a bit more justice.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's do that. So that's acknowledgement covered off. I think we had a good basis there, or some examples of how acknowledgement from the ego stand might be showing up, and it can show up in your relationship, in your workplace, with your kids, with your friends, and just that need for someone to recognize you, recognition.
Because oftentimes the reason you're searching for it is because the ego doesn't feel enough as it is. It's always seeking for that acknowledgement outside of itself, or recognition, or whatever form it shows up in, but it's always seeking outside of itself. So it's
Yeah. And I guess in just recognizing it, you start to realize that you're probably doing actions or inactions to manipulate that situation to get acknowledgement. So you might be purposely going out of your way to do something or not do something that doesn't necessarily feel true for you in that moment. So you're sort of putting yourself out, I suppose, to go and do stuff that may not actually, you really don't want to do. But it's going to make you feel good because you're going to get acknowledged from that person, whether it's your husband or wife or your friend or whatever, that goes, oh, wow, you did a really good job. Thank you so much. Like, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, yeah, I feel really good now.
And sometimes you think it too because you felt like you lacked it earlier, say, in life. So it could have been like a childhood situation that you didn't maybe feel like you got that from your parents or maybe your school teachers or your friends or and so then you go further on into your adult life and you carry that feeling through. You still keep searching for this acknowledgement, even though if you might be, really accomplished on the outside, and you might feel like you've, done some good stuff and you're happy with where you are in your life, but there's still this part of you that wants that outside, reflection back that, oh, I've done a good job, that. So it can show up like that as well sometimes as well. So.
Acknowledgement can be a big one in the workplace as well. So, you can really go out of your way to stay back late, to take on extra projects, to really overextend yourself in the workspace to get that acknowledgement from your boss, particularly if your boss is not giving it to you. Or your boss doesn't like you that much, then you're going to try even harder, and that's what the ego does. It's like, I'm going to do everything in my power now to be recognized by my boss that I'm actually doing a really good job. And until you get that, you will keep being driven. So what can be conceived as pure motivation, and I'm excited to get this project done, actually might have an agenda underneath it. That, I guess that's always the thing with motivation versus inspiration, is the motivation thing is always going to be ego driven by one of those 5 things. It's always to do with the outside world. You have to get motivated by something. So it's either, more money or more recognition or acknowledgement or more security or all these different things we're going to be talking about.
Achievement or,
all these things that show up. So if you're coming from a space of doing something because you've got to be motivated, and then you have to, and you'll know when you've got to do that because you have to get motivated. Like it's always the thing that we talk about in personal development. Well, I have to get motivated. And it's like, then it's not true for you, because otherwise you would have an inspired feeling, which is a real energy, an infinite energy that flows through you and out into the world of putting out something, a piece of work, doesn't matter what it is, what form it comes in, or your relationship or how you show up in the world is just so natural for you and so true to who you are and so effortless. So it's not, so motivation is effortful and inspiration is effortless. It really does take no effort at all, because it's not actually even you doing it. It's the infinite self coming through you to actually produce whatever's being created in the world. And
you might still get outside acknowledgement, even coming from that true energy. You might still get it, but you'll notice
you do get it.
Do the up and down thing, like it doesn't really elevate you in the sense of like, oh wow, I'm really good, and you build yourself up. But you'll notice that you can stay very neutral with that. You take it on as a pure appreciation. That's probably the best word for it. It's a sense of appreciation and gratefulness rather than acknowledgement and recognition and that sort of elevated state that it puts you into as well. So,
but the funny thing is, because it was infinite expression and it's come through you out into the world and it's full of love, because that's what the infinite is, it's going to attract people to you. So you are going to get acknowledgement. You're going to get so much more acknowledgement from that than you are trying to motivate people and trying to do this and trying to do that and all these manipulations and bits and pieces. So, but Mandy's exactly right. Like, it doesn't affect you when you actually get that acknowledgement. It's like, yeah, I just did this for me because it felt right in the moment. Like, cool. Like, I'm really glad you got something out of it. And there's that real genuine, down to earth, wow, I'm really cool that you got something from that. I'm really glad. And it's nothing more than that. And that's when it does genuinely help people. It's sort of quite funny where a lot of people say, oh, I'm doing this project to help people. And it's like, yeah, full of agenda. So you don't have to try and help people. It will help people automatically if you just stay true to you and do what's true for you in every moment. And whatever you put out into the world or not put out into the world, doesn't matter. It will help people regardless. Like, you can't help but help people. That's the way it's set up. So there's just no, it's the old Yoda thing. There is no try. There is only do or not.
Yep. Movie.
Yeah, very cool movie.
All right, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll address some of the other elements or the feelings that the ego is seeking.
Yes.
Dive into those a bit more.
Yes, sounds good. All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Have fun.
See you soon.
Bye.